Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this edition of Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. We have plenty on our plate today, so let's get started with the day's highlights. It's becoming harder for young Korean parents to raise kids without the help of their own parents. And this shift in caretakers is producing some new trends. From the G20 finance meeting in Shanghai to doubts hanging over Taiwan's Foxconn deal to buy Japan's Sharp, we look into some of the global business stories that made headlines this week. But first, Korea's household income rose at the slowest pace last year since 2009, when the country was hit hard by the global financial crisis. Statistics Korea says the average annual income of households stood at slightly over 4.3 million won, which is roughly $3,500, up 1.6% from a year ago. The household inflation adjusted income, or in other words, real income, rose a mere 0.9%. The slow growth came as earnings of those self-employed dropped after the MERS outbreak put a dent in overall consumption. This also contributed to the sharp fall in the number of independent business owners, which slid by 89,000 last year, marking the biggest decrease in 5 years. Korea's productivity level in services compared to manufacturing sits at the bottom among 26 OECD countries surveyed, dragging down its overall labor productivity. This comes from a new OECD report on economic policy reforms that includes recommendations for specific countries. The organization recommends that Seoul strip back on regulatory barriers in professional services and retail distribution to improve service productivity. It also cites the rapidly aging population as a key challenge the economy faces in attaining solid growth, saying that Korea should raise female labor participation by promoting balanced life between work and family. It's out, a list that has the details of just how much Korea's biggest business tycoons took home in dividends last year. And our Park Ji-won tells us that most of the names on that list were those that control the country's biggest conglomerates.
More than 20 shareholders in Korea received more than 10 billion Korean won, or some $8 million in dividend returns last year. According to data released by equity research firm FN Guide, Samsung Group chairman Lee Gun-hee topped the list, receiving over $143 million. The returns came from the stocks he owns in Samsung Electronics, Samsung Life Insurance, and Samsung C&T. The second biggest recipient was Hyundai Motor Group chairman Chung Mong-gu, who took home some $62 million. SK Group chairman Choi Tae-won was third with over $45 million, followed by Hyundai Motor Group vice chairman Chung Eui-sun and Samsung Electronics vice chairman Lee Jae-yong, who is the son of Lee Gun-hee. Amore Pacific CEO Seo Kyung-bae and LG Group chairman Koo Bong-moo were ranked 6th and 7th respectively, each getting around $20 million. Hong Na-hee, director of the Leum Samsung Museum of Art and wife of Lee Gun-hee, was 8th, pocketing $17.5 million. She was also the highest female on the list. Park Ji-won, Business Daily.
Apple has asked a U.S. court to reverse its order demanding the company help the FBI unlock an iPhone tied to an investigation into the mass shooting in San Bernardino late last year. As to why the company feels the order violates its First Amendment rights, Apple has previously said the FBI's request would greatly undermine the security of its phones, and the computer codes are an expression of free speech. Therefore, having to write a code to unlock the phone would be akin to compelled speech. The tech giant also said the case creates a quote-unquote unprecedented burden on the company, as it risks setting a precedent for future cases where governments can force firms to unlock their handsets. And Apple's not fighting this battle alone, as Facebook, Twitter, and Microsoft have all said they will back Apple by filing a brief in support. One of the world's biggest tech shows, the Mobile World Congress, ended this week. For more on what gained traction during the 4-day event and what failed to steal the limelight, our Kim Ji-yeon reports from Barcelona.
Virtual reality devices, 5G networks, and mobile security solutions took center stage at this year's Mobile World Congress. Security software programs are critical in the era of the Internet of Things, in which every device is connected to the World Wide Web. Korea's Samsung SCS brought its Knox workspace platform for Samsung mobile devices. With the app, private or company data is isolated from other data on the device on a separate environment, often called a container, and encrypted to protect against malware and external attacks. A Samsung product consultant explains a situation in which someone could protect sensitive corporate data even after losing a phone.
First thing I do is I call the IT admin and tell him I've lost my phone. He locks my Knox container, so all of the business data is secure. But after 2 minutes, I turn over a bit of paper on my desk and there it is. I call him back and he unlocks it. If after 2 hours I still haven't found it, so what he'll do is wipe the container.
VR devices definitely got the lion's share of attention at this year's MWC. Samsung's 40-year VR theater, a popular attraction at last month's Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, was popular again here, with people waiting in line for nearly an hour to try it out. That was the same story for Korea's largest mobile carrier, SK Telecom, with its virtual reality submarine experience. Korea-based LG Electronics also had a small 4C VR experience corner that was packed with people too. That's in stark contrast to last year's MWC, where VR was on the fringes, and smart cars and wearables, including smartwatches and smart bands, were all the rage.
This year's MWC is a reminder of how fickle and unpredictable IT trends are. What's cool this year may not be the next, but one thing's for sure, whoever was here this year will be back in 2017. Kim Ji-yeon, Business Daily, Barcelona.
Recently, a large baby product fair took place here in Seoul, which is estimated to have attracted over 100,000 people checking out the latest baby products. But beyond the products themselves, the event also gives a snapshot of a shift in caretakers. Our Lee Joo-young takes us there.
At this large-scale baby product exhibition, Park Eun-nan is looking through baby wraps, a product more popular with older generations in Korea when it comes to carrying babies.
My mom recommended them, saying they're more comfortable. So I tried it for my first child and it was good, so I want another for my second.
Also at the expo are more cloth diapers as opposed to disposable ones, reflecting a shift in taste among those purchasing baby products. The organizers of the expo, held twice a year, said around 20% of vendors participating are catering to grandparent caretakers as they assume more responsibilities for childcare to help out their own children. Over 50% of dual-income couples rely on their parents to take care of their children, according to figures from 2012, an increase of 34% from 2009, according to the Ministry of Health and Welfare. And this year, the number of grandparents looking after their grandchildren is said to have risen to roughly 2.5 million nationwide. Another notable difference at the fair seen this year is the growing number of men. Male visitors accounted for 47% of total participants at the exposition, up 20% from 3 years ago.
As more men take active roles in childcare, they're looking for products to enjoy with their kids.
The fair organizers said more of their online sales of baby goods are also coming from male consumers. Experts say the growing presence of men in childcare is closely linked to the rise in paternity leaves, which surged over 42% last year compared to a year before, giving fathers more quality time to spend with their children. Lee Joo-young, Business Daily.
And yes, it's Friday, and that means time for a look through some global business headlines with our Eunice Kim, who joins me in the studio. Welcome back, Eunice.
Thank you. Good to be back.
All right, so the world's top 20 economies are now engaged in a two-day meeting in Shanghai, where they will most likely be discussing the global economic downturn, where forecasters like Citigroup is saying that we are seeing a recession coming, or at least chances of it.
There are lots of concerns about this, and the call ahead of this G20 finance ministers
summit has been for stronger policy coordination, which to stabilize the global economy. Now, this is also the message that Korea's Finance Minister Yoo Il-ho will be bringing to the table, but onlookers are tempering expectations for a policy breakthrough. Take a look.
There's just no shortage of headwinds. The oil glut that frazzles global markets, underwhelming monetary policy, diverging currencies, and of course, China's slowing economic growth. World trade in 2015 was at its worst since the global financial crisis, says the World Trade Monitor in a fresh report, adding cross-border trade dropped nearly 14% in the dollar-based value of goods. Citigroup says global growth is at a highly precarious point and that the chances of a recession blowing through the world economy are high and only climbing. China was singled out as one of the few key triggers, specifically its structural and cyclical slowdowns and its, quote, unsustainable exchange rate regime. In fact, a number of experts had called on the G20 meeting to address the volatility in currencies, perhaps in the fashion of the 1985 Plaza Accord. Advanced countries then had worked together to weaken a very strong U.S. dollar. But Beijing has rejected any plans for a Plaza Accord-style currency deal. The IMF is calling for G20 finance ministers and central bankers to take bold cooperative action to turn the tide, suggesting boosting public investment and structural reform support. For its part, host China appears to be responding to at least one call: better communication, as it makes outsized moves in its giant shift toward a consumption-based economy.
We understand how important to correctly communicate with the market, and transparency indeed is important for people to understand the policy.
The Chinese vice finance minister went on to recognize China's impact on the global economy as he pledged stability in the yuan, assuring that Beijing has taken all necessary measures to ensure the right policies are in place to deal with global challenges. Many eyes will be watching discussions out of Shanghai this weekend. But given that a mix of advanced and emerging economies with very different agendas are represented, a major breakthrough is not anticipated.
So a measure of how these messages are being received by the wider public is, of course, the markets. So how have they reacted?
Well, in fact, on the eve of this G20 summit, we saw Chinese equities being hammered. Not exactly the kickoff that Beijing likely wanted. Now, at Thursday's close, the Shanghai Composite sank 6.4%, or $260 billion in losses. That is the worst the bourse had registered in a month and puts the year-to-date performance at minus 22%. Ouch. To put this into some perspective, for every stock that had made gains, about 70 stocks took a fall. Now, many of them were in industry and technology. As for Friday, the bourse struggled to recover those losses. After zigzagging before lunch, stocks on the main bourse briefly dropped into negative territory. In late trading, though, it was back up, gaining shy of 1%. And staying with the market, stocks of electronics giant Sharp saw double-digit losses for the second straight day on Friday. This after iPhone assembler Foxconn hit the brakes on a hard-fought plan to rescue the troubled Japanese firm by taking on a majority stake. Last Thursday, late Thursday of this week, Foxconn had said it had belatedly received, quote, new material information that required additional resolution. The one-paragraph statement did not provide more details, but according to a Wall Street Journal report, unnamed sources had said that material information was a list of contingent liabilities at Sharp amounting to up to $3.1 billion.
Now, this is significant because this deal going through was pretty extraordinary, right? I mean, outside companies rarely win control over a Japanese company.
You're absolutely right. And of course, this is Sharp we are talking about. Not only is it a household name globally in LCDs, now it's a company with a history of more than 100 years. And Foxconn is, of course, a Taiwanese manufacturer. There was another bid by the state-backed Innovation Network Corps of Japan, or INCJ. And in fact, initially it appeared it had the upper hand amid concerns related to Sharp's display technology falling into foreign hands. But Foxconn had won unanimous board approval yesterday as the value of the deal was double that of INCJ's and did not require spinning off its businesses. Foxconn, also known as Honhai, was looking to diversify its operations by moving into producing key electronic components over just assembling them, potentially going head-to-head with Korea's Samsung Electronics.
Well, we'll definitely have to keep an eye on if this deal is going to go through.
We'll have to wait and see.
All right, thank you so much for coming in today.
You bet.
And that wraps it up for today and this week. Thanks so much for staying with us throughout our program. We'll be back next week at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Have a great weekend.